Good morning, my delightful things. Happy Friday. Finally, we can move on to the weekend, unless some of you have to work, and then I sincerely apologize to you. Unless you like your job, then that's great. Welcome back to the Cavern of Secrets. To the newcomers, welcome to the channel. I'm Kasara, bringing you the strange and horrifying, although we're not talking about anything like that today, but whatever. Most of the time, that is what I talk about. Anyways. So, lately we've been talking about DID, which is dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality disorder. If you'd like to know more, check out the card above me. So, while I was doing some research on DID, I came across whether Ted Bundy had the disorder or not. I'm not as familiar with his case compared to Gacy or Ramirez because I had to do my thesis on serial killers and I chose Gacy and Ramirez for my thesis. So I had to do a lot of research on this topic, particularly. I know I mentioned I would stay away from discussing serial killers, but I feel there's a big issue surrounding serial killers, mass murderers, and criminals in general. We label them all monsters and refuse to look at what caused it or what may have contributed to it. They aren't born this way. Now some disorders are hereditary, but most are triggered by trauma. If we spent more time focusing on the contributing factors, we may be able to prevent some mental illnesses and some of these acts from occurring. There was a study conducted where they found that 90% of lifetime trauma exposure was reported among psychiatric patients. Another study found 61% of patients in a psychiatric setting experienced at least one traumatic event. This indicates that psychiatric patients appear to have been exposed to more traumatic events than the general population, which tells me it's something we should be looking at instead of seeing people with mental illnesses as monsters or killers. I could go on a tangent about this, because I really could. I could rant and rave about this, but I'm going to try and stay on track. I will say I'll be focusing on Ted Bundy's mental health, not his murders, because I'm more interested in his background and mental health. I will leave links in the description for those of you who want to know more about him, his disorder, upbringing, things like that. What I did find interesting about Ted Bundy is there's some inconsistent information about his childhood. Some articles claimed that he came from a normal, healthy household, while others stated otherwise. So I'm not sure which is true and which isn't, to be honest. I'm going to leave that up to you. However, if Ted's childhood was normal, then if you recall from my video about DID, he wouldn't have the disorder since it is a trauma-based disorder. According to one resource, psychiatrist Dorothy Lewis, in an interview with Bundy, he described his grandfather that he lived with early on as extremely violent and a frightening individual. According to the interview, Bundy stated that his grandfather would kick dogs, swing cats by their tails, beat people who angered him, and read pornography voraciously. End quote. If his grandfather was abusive, and if Bundy saw his grandfather abusing animals, it could have had an impact on his mental health. And it could have explained why he was harming animals at a young age. A childhood friend of Bundy, Sandy Holt, stated that Ted would build tiger traps in the woods, which are basically pits where you have spears, I guess you could call them, sticking out of the ground in the pit, and you would cover it with leaves, and if anything fell in the pit, they'd be skewered, which is horrifying. So he would build those in the woods, hoping to get animals. And he also would buy mice from a local pet store and build small enclosures in the woods and decide which mouse would live or die, which apparently he also did with his victims. Later in life, not during childhood. Dorothy Lewis, who testified at one of Bundy's hearings, believed Bundy was bipolar, not someone with DID. Lewis noticed that Bundy could go from a state of euphoria and compulsive talking to anger and long periods of silence almost instantly. However, it wasn't just personality that shifted. In another interview with Stephen McCoud, Bundy said some things that align with DID. He would speak in the third person and describe this other power called the entity. According to Bundy in this interview, he claimed the conditioning grew until it controlled him. He would hear a voice and did as the entity told him. It would reach a point where the anger, the frustration, the anxiety, the poor self-image, feeling cheated, wronged, insecure, where he just decided upon young, attractive women being his victims. When the need of that malignant condition had been satisfied through sexual release, he realized he couldn't let the girl go. End quote. Bundy explained that this person inside him felt that they could satisfy their urges by killing, but the act instead only made the void larger, which caused him to keep killing. Bundy never admitted to having a mental illness or suffering from any type of disorder. He also frequently lied or was in a state of denial about violence within the household and other events throughout his childhood and adolescent years. Arnon Edelston, a professor, believed Bundy suffered from DID and that he had antisocial personality disorder with it. So the two together is what caused Bundy to commit his horrendous crimes. Edelston claimed that the abuse Bundy suffered as a child and the discovery that he was born illegitimately caused his personality to split into two identities so that he could run away from his difficulties into the fantasy world. I'm not sure what Ted Bundy had for mental illness. I remember in my psych classes we were told he had bipolar disorder from my professors. But I do think it's interesting that he may have had DID. Maybe he had both bipolar disorder and DID, or maybe antisocial personality disorder and DID. I think the experts on the case had great theories that potentially explained his behaviors and crimes, but I don't know. And he was executed, so there's no way to actually find out more about this. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think he had DID or a combination of disorders or just one of these? Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Or if you just found something interesting about him that you'd like to share, maybe something that you heard or found out. Tune in later tonight for my review of the film Run. It is available to stream on Hulu for those of you who are interested to find out what this movie is about before you watch my movie review. Tuesday, I'll do a more outline explanation of bipolar disorder and what that is. Next Friday, I'll discuss antisocial personality disorder and borderline personality disorder to kind of wrap up the month. And partially the reason why I chose these disorders specifically is, yes, they are the ones that are more common among serial killers, but I think it's important to kind of give a little bit of what these disorders are to kind of educate. And not everyone with these disorders are killers or criminals. A lot of people are everyday people. They live their lives. They don't commit crimes or anything like that. They just live life. Yes, some struggle and some have difficulties that can affect their relationships and their everyday life, depending on what the disorder is and what symptoms they're having and things like that. So I just think it's important to kind of understand what they are. Anyways, so after next week, we'll be in October. Can you believe it? The month's almost over. And October is my favorite month, for those of you who don't know. I'll be returning to scary stories and lots of horror movie reviews, and hopefully some that I haven't seen before. If there's a horror movie that you'd like me to check out, or any movie for that matter, let me know in the comments and I will give it a watch. I actually watch a lot of random type of movies. I like sci-fi movies, I like action movies, adventure movies, fantasy, horror, of course, thrillers, psychological thrillers, and so on and so forth. And one guilty pleasure of mine is musicals. Which sounds so messed up. You go from horror to that, but it's fine. We all have those guilty pleasures. So stay tuned for that and more updates to come. Take care, and I hope you have a fabulous weekend. Bye, everyone.